Hey everybody, Matt Maynard here with another helpful video, and today I'm going to be talking about why rewarding your children is actually a terrible idea and why I recommend you never, ever, ever even begin to try and implement rewarding children's behavior. It is a total trap. Okay, a lot of other parenting systems out there are talking about how you need to set up behavioral reward charts and you need to give your child incentives in order to create behavioral change. And I can tell you that nothing is further from the truth. This is the biggest myth that has ever been created, and it's rooted in well-intentioned, loving ideas, but I can promise you it will eventually come to a climactic outburst of craziness between you, your child, your partner. It just always inevitably ends in calamity. I'm going to tell you why. Ultimately, a lot of the behaviors that you're trying to shape or change in your child are average, normal, everyday behaviors. And ultimately, your child is really starting to understand how the world works. And so as you start off and you set a precedence of giving something external for a behavior or a shift in the child's kind of attitude or perspective, what you're actually doing is you're setting an emotional anchor that is going to consistently carry with them throughout their life. And these anchors are points of reference that your child will later revert back to and recognize and go, oh, well, I should be getting something for this. And the reality is most of the behaviors we're looking for are not going to be externally validated or rewarded in society, in school, in relationships, in their work. And ultimately, it takes away and it removes the intrinsic character building that ultimately I know you're trying to create and really highly effective parents try and create. And so instead, what I recommend parents do is talk more about the pride and the feeling that the child gets from doing the right thing for themselves. One major problem that I see is that a lot of parents, what they'll do is they'll say, oh, I'm proud of you. Or, you know, daddy and I or mommy and I are proud of you. And I'm not knocking you if you do this. That's well-intentioned. What I am trying to show you is that it doesn't really matter whether or not you're proud of the child. The child needs to learn to be proud of themselves first. Your pride, your encouragement, your validation verbally is really secondary, and that's something that I would actually challenge you to shift on and start saying you should feel proud of yourself and you should actually feel good about yourself for making that choice on your own, instead of, hey, daddy and I, mommy are really proud of the fact that you did this, because now it looks like the child's now doing you a favor, right? That's an extrinsic validator, no different than a reward, say, for going to school, getting up on time, or being able to, you know, get good grades. Those are all outcomes that should actually just create self-esteem, pride, and dignity in your child. And so instead of incentivizing or rewarding average behavior, that verbal validation is something that is incredibly powerful, but make sure the focal point is on the child feeling proud for themselves, not you guys feeling proud of them or other people feeling proud of them, because ultimately you're also going to unintentionally create emotional enmeshment, which is not a healthy boundary and not something that you really want. You can still say that we're proud of you, but that should be the secondary. That should come later, and that should be completely disconnected as well, because inevitably you really want the child to develop that intrinsically for themselves and by themselves. Does that make sense? Because ultimately, some of the cases that I now work on, they've been rewarding behaviors. Just even the child getting up on time after the third time the parents ask them is now being rewarded with extra video game time. And it seems like it's innocent and it's small. It's not that big of a deal, because parents all the time will be like, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. You're right, it's not that big of a deal now when they're young, but you're just setting a precedence. You're setting an emotional anchor that inevitably, as they get older, is going to be harder and harder and harder to sustain, and ultimately it's going to create a perspective and a understanding in the child's mind that this is how things work. And I can tell you, nothing is more emotionally painful and or devastating than the realization that, quite honestly, they're not going to keep getting rewarded, and it doesn't really matter if, you know, other people are proud of them. It's really about what they're doing for themselves, and that fall from grace, that calamity that comes after that is really, it really is terrible for the kid. You feel terrible as the parent undoing that and watching the child kind of emotionally melt down and have to come to these harder conclusions as they get older. is much more painful, and it's unnecessary too. I think that's really what it comes down to. It's not even necessary. You don't even need to even do this.